Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to OPC Season 2. We're still into Week 2 and into the final day as well. I'm Kevin Everett-Walker, joined with me this evening, Matt Pixie Carroll. And there it is, OPC Sunday, 3 matches.
OPC Sunday. Okay. But yeah, well, yeah, 3 matches. 3 matches like every other day of the tournament. Actually, well, next week on the Sunday, we get 4 matches.
Not every day.
Yeah, so like there's some that are actually, it's also an OPC Sunday, but it's not 3 matches, it's 4.
Yeah. We are, I think, now officially past the halfway mark of round robin 1. So we've seen some interesting results so far, and certainly some unexpected results.
Yeah.
Last night was definitely attributing to that. And tonight, I think, perhaps room for a few extra upsets maybe on the cards. We talk about Libalent Supreme yesterday really pulling their weight in their match against Flash Wolves. We talk about the fact that Hong Kong Attitude had that 3-0 victory against Blank as well. And now tonight, Blank and Libalent Supreme face up first.
Yeah, and that is how this is going to be. This is really interesting for that reason because of Blank's loss. But I do kind of want to correct a bit of what you said there. I think some unexpected results last night if you haven't been paying attention. And that's the thing, right? What we actually saw, I feel, with the Hong Kong Attitude game and then also with the Libalent Flash Wolves game was a couple of things that have been brewing for a little while really coming to fruition, and that's Blank not quite hitting the mark, Hong Kong Attitude really upping their skill level, and the overall closeness of all of these teams.
Let's take a look at the teams now. First up, it's going to be Blank on that home side. Of course, you're going to have to good look at their opponents as well. Libalent Supreme, but Blank, remember, this is a new roster of Blank, not the same Blank as Season 1. 2 new members, Huwu and Hus. They had a great Day 1 performance. Day 2, they got their loss, and here we go, Libalent Supreme, coming up from the OPC Season 2 qualifier.
And this has been interesting because we talk about this a lot. The other team that got through that qualifier was Ardiant, who are absolutely tearing up the standings right now. Libalent is still hungry for that win. They haven't actually got one yet, but last night, of course, they did pick up a map win against Flash Wolves and actually had what was all things considered a very close series, one that quite possibly could have resulted in a Libalent win. And that's what they carry into this. That's how they performed against Flash Wolves. And Blank are fresh off a loss to Hong Kong Attitude. This is very winnable for Libalent here.
Let's just get a few words now from both sides. Got Hus and Serenity on the left, Untitled on the right.
What do you want to say? Good luck, have fun.
他说 Good luck, have fun。Jason， 那你要不要代表这 Blank 也是赛前喊话一下？
我这次只是要当翻译而已，我也。
So I'm just here to translate.
好了，那你就加点讲一下嘛。你这现在。
Are you done? Just hello everyone. Hope you guys cheer us on. Hope make you proud. 就希望大家在澳洲看得到各位，我们可以希望你们可以以我们为荣。
是觉得很今天就是现在当选手了嘛，自己也以一个选手的身份喊个话啊。
I feel like you're a player now. Do you have something to say?
就是我还是经理，我也还是教练，那我现在负责就是确保所有的选手没有任何后顾之忧，就是可以全心专注游戏。
是的，自己
Hope all the players can
好的，那接下来
remain positive and still have really good results.
悔いの残らないように正々堂々戦います。
他说他们会尽全力打好比赛，然后不留遗憾了。那接下来呢，两队都要准备。
And Hotade says we're going to do our best here and leave nothing behind, no regrets into this match. So there it is. And I think for Libalent Supreme, they struck a blow against Flash Wolves last night, like we mentioned. Not an easy thing to do, not something that every team gets to do, and certainly not something you might expect from a team like Libalent Supreme, who are currently 8th in the standings, going up against a team that finished 1st in the last season. So already we're seeing bits and pieces of Flash Wolves kind of taking a few shots and getting a bit wounded earlier on in the season. But also at the same time, I think the same could be said about Blank, and maybe a little bit more extreme because Blank have actually now dropped a match.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? What Blank actually really want to get out of tonight is they want to prove, okay, look, last night, maybe things weren't going right, things were a bit shaky, but that's not the real us, and they want to show us who the real Blank is tonight. I think that's going to be the key thing for them to walk away from this with. A close win probably wouldn't be good enough in that regard if they really want to hold on to this image of being this, we are the team that came 2nd place kind of image. And I think that is quite important for them to maintain, given the caliber of competition now in Season 2. You don't want it to be that, a team that was good enough to be 2nd place may not even make playoffs. You don't want that to be your team's story.
And just to refresh everyone on the OPC Season 2 format as well, first of all, playing for a pretty big prize pot. I think it's 8.8 million Taiwan dollars in total, 3 million of that going to the first place, roughly 100,000 USD. 8 teams, we already know that, across many different countries, mainly represented by Taiwan, but you've got some of the others in there as well. Going to be playing over 9 weeks, but first off, let's take a look at the standings. Ardiant 4-0 leading the way. Flash Wolves 3-0 now coming off an extra win last night. Blank taking their first loss of the season. AHQ with a loss earlier on in the season. Hong Kong Attitude sitting at 2-3 after picking up that one win against Blank. Machi 1-3. You also had Mega Thunder at 1-3. And then Libalent Supreme still sitting at the bottom with 0 wins.
And what that means really for Libalent is it's not out of the question at all for them to, for example, pick up a win here, and then you see the rest of the matches that are up today. If AHQ were to beat Mega Thunder and Flash Wolves beat Machi, suddenly that's actually a tie for that bottom 3, which means it's very achievable for any of those teams to get mobile, to move further upward in the standings, start to knock out someone from that top 4. And look, that's always going to be the case in this tournament because it's a little bit shorter than Season 1. There's going to be more fluidity in the standings, so there is always going to be the chance, even for a last place team, to just have a great win streak, dislodge the 4th place team and make playoffs. So having a fairly even bottom of the table actually means that could come out of anywhere.
There you go. I'll have on your screens as well some of the players on both the 2 squads. Nothing too out of the ordinary here. We do remember that we have Serenity on the sub lineup for Blank. So he's both coaching and substitute for the Blank roster, but unlikely to see him in any of the season's gameplays unless something really dire happens to one of the players.
Yeah, technically he was, I believe, a substitute for last season as well, but there was not any particular point where he was needed. But he has actually said himself, by the way, if someone was to be extremely ill or grievously injured, if someone wasn't able to play for some extraneous circumstances, then he would step up. Which makes me wonder, like, what if all 6 of them get really ill? And like Serenity suddenly has to play for everyone.
Yeah, so he becomes Spider-Man and he just,
This is
4 legs and 4 arms and whatever it is and just goes for it.
That's not quite how Spider-Man works, but
I meant like a literal, you know what I mean.
I've just got a really terrifying picture in my head. By the way, after that opening interview, I'm now raised with the question, is Huss really tall or is everyone else just really short?
Why not both?
Because
Why not both?
That happens sometimes. Like, I'm not there in person. For all I know, all of those people are actually just really short, and I've just never had a point of comparison. Like, what if Huss is just a really normal height guy and everyone's really small in Taiwan? I don't know.
What if Huss is really short, actually?
Huss is, it's just a perspective trick, like how they shot Lord of the Rings with like the Hobbits
man.
and Gandalf. Like,
Yeah.
maybe
Movie
that's
magic from Taiwan.
movie magic going on in Chinese Taipei right now. The way they
Speaking
do
of
it.
magic,
Well, yeah.
Blank magic is something I want to talk about because that was something in the first appearance that we saw from Blank, especially it was the one against Machi Esports, where I kind of felt like Blank had a pretty rough game in the sense that, look, they won, but they didn't win cleanly. They won. It took them a lot of effort to win that game, and certainly a lot of fights and a lot of circumstances. They almost didn't win. They almost just managed to scrape on through. Now, Libalent Supreme kind of gave up that impression a little bit against Flash Wolves as well. The one map that did win, you have to give full credit to them. That was the King's Row map that they got that. But you look, even the Lijiang Tower against Flash Wolves, that could potentially have gone to them as well. That was a 1-2 victory. In fact, they struck first blood against Flash Wolves on Lijiang as well because they got the original map went on, I believe it was Gardens, if I'm not mistaken. So both of these teams have had sort of those moments where they do climb their way back into the game. And for Blank, that just didn't happen against Hong Kong Attitude. For Libalent Supreme, they got one map off that, but not any of the other maps, unfortunately, against Flash.
Yeah. And look, close as some of those other ones were, you're right. Yeah, at the end of the day, they didn't get them over the line. And we do actually talk about that quite a bit because, look, teams do drop maps. Like, that's not at all unheard of. I mean, even winning the finals, Flash Wolves did drop maps to Blank. I mean, you expect that with close competition. And Flash Wolves won and still deserved the win, even though it was a close series, because they won more. I know that sounds like I'm stating the obvious, but we can talk about close series and what it means potentially, and we can say, well, it certainly felt like Libalent could have won, but they didn't. And there is always a reason they didn't. There is an absolute reason why Flash Wolves were able to get it over the line where Libalent were consistently enough to win the series. And that often is actually the difference between teams when it comes down to it, especially when you've got a lot of teams that feel closer and closer in terms of skill level. It's which team just executes slightly better than the rest. And that's where, that ends up being how the standings start to fall. So what we're really going to get tonight, above all else, is between these two teams, all notions of skill level and relative closeness thereof aside, which team is better at executing when it counts?
And that's definitely something important to take note. I think, for Libalent Supreme, nearly there, not quite for Hong Kong Attitude versus Blank. I mean, Blank, good showing. I'm going to use the word good, maybe not great, but good showing on their first day of the OPC. And still, I guess, trying to figure out where this team is sitting because they have the 2 new members. They are trying to get back to where they were at a minimum and then go beyond where they were last season at that number 2 spot. They want to fight for number 1. But this time in number 1, you have a lot of teams in contention for that. Flash Wolves come back. They got a 3-0 record right now. Ardi in the back, or Ardi now here rather, 4-0 record and looking better than every single team. We compare the match between Ardi and Machi and then the match between Blank and Machi. And those are 2 very different outcomes and 2 very different, I feel, kind of results. And the fact that, look, Machi lost both, but actually Ardian won quite heavily and Blank didn't look as convincing.
And even then, beyond that, the rest of the top 4 is in this really interesting spot right now. Because right now, you have Blank and AHQ both tied for 3rd place, which results in being the remainder of that 3rd and 4th spot. So you can say, well, in that case, the 3rd place and the 4th place will get determined by who wins that series. Well, actually, no, because you've got Blank losing to Hong Kong Attitude in the mix there. And if it comes to pass that Hong Kong Attitude go on to beat AHQ, which is also an extremely real possibility, I would even say right now they're probably favored in that regard, then actually it could be that neither Blank nor AHQ are truly top 4 material, and you know, there's going to be like this arms race between the 2 to just barely hold on to that 4th place slot. So if that's the situation the 2nd and 3rd place teams end up in, rather the 2nd and 3rd place teams from last season, if neither of them are 3rd and they're both just fighting for 4th, it really starts to show exactly what we've been talking about from day 1, and that is this overall closeness of teams. That is how unpredictable the overall result is going to be here.
And actually, on that point as well, we have AHQ and AHQ and Mega Thunder rather after this match, and that's going to be interesting as well because you talk about unpredictability. I think that is going to be unpredictable. Mega Thunder have sort of been in the space now where you're not too sure who they are, who they're not going to beat. We thought they'd have a close game against Blank. Unfortunately, that was Blank taking out 3-0. They lost against Machi, but then they also beat Hong Kong Attitude, who Blank also then lost to, and everything's just sort of in this jumbled circle now. So that is why we look at a match like Blank versus Libalent Supreme, and I don't want to call it too early for either side because Libalent really struck a blow against Flash Wolves last night that I don't think Flash Wolves were really expecting. And really, when you look at games 3 and 4 in that series, it really showed because after they lost Kings Row, the game, the 2nd map, Flash Wolves came back in a really big way and kind of took it to a next level. They're really pushing into the next gear for their team, and I don't know if Libalent Supreme were able to catch up with that. But now against Blank, I mean, the comparison has to be made, at least from my perspective. Look, Hong Kong Attitude had a very close series against Flash Wolves, much closer than Libalent Supreme. Then they beat Blank. Yeah. So now what?
Exactly, and I think what we're actually most likely to see, truly, over the majority of this season, excuse me, or at least for these next few weeks, you know, I don't think this will change until the final weeks of competition. I think we're very likely to get a situation where 1st and 2nd place look fairly solid, and then we enter question mark territory where 3rd and 4th could go to pretty much anyone. I feel like the truth of that will be dependent on AHQ's performance, because if they have a really good performance in the next match against Mega Thunder, then I would say maybe it's 1st, 2nd, 3rd look pretty solid. But that's the thing, right? That's the kind of tournament we're looking at right now. There's a lot more unpredictability in results. You really can't call anything. It makes every match worth watching, for one thing. And to that end, first match of the day, Lijiang Tower. Let's get stuck into it. Libalent Supreme taking on Blank.
Yep, and it's going to be Huss and Hotari going off onto the well-and-tested Doomfist. That both of these players have had a lot of time now, at least in the OPC, and have shown off a lot of different skill in this game as well.
Yeah, and both have gone off and been shut down in equal measure, so this is going to be an interesting match just to see which one goes off more than the other. So far, it's Hotari taking out his counterpart. That's a pretty good way to say it's going to be me, and takes out Gunba as well as Jasper there. So now Blank very much back-footed. I Eat You Up just can't seem to get enough work done on his own. Defense Matrix actually keeping Deriton well covered there as Eat You Up tries to get on and be aggressive there. They're actually just going to keep this fight alive since they've got the positioning. They do lose the point, but they can just go ahead and re-aggress. They've got the respawns in, and they popped Jasper's mech.
I like the discipline that Blank are taking here. They're not trying to overextend. They are just regrouping. They understand they lost Huss quite early. They lost Gumba as well. Now they have 6 again, and you were absolutely right. They might not have the point, but they have the patience, and now they are going.
Yeah, Pepper is wrapping around, but Huss gets revenge for that opening kill and Eat You Up, pulling his weight there with the Pulse Bomb Huss as well. And there we go, the DPS of Blank going off. This is very reminiscent of what happened versus Machi, where they did actually lose the opening fight, but the second one was a win for Blank, and it looked a lot more convincing than Libalent's first fight win.
And Ellis didn't really clean up any additional members there. They got the early 2 picks, went directly for the cap. That's probably a good idea. In fact, I kind of agree with that. Get the early cap, get the early progress, but then you need to stop Blank from actually coming back and make sure they don't have the ability to retake, because Blank do exactly that.
Now here's the thing as well, Libalent actually won the first map of Lijiang yesterday against Flash Wolves, and it was in a similar thing. They got the early cap and then were able to get a cap back later on down the line, and the extra progress helped them. But in this situation, with this fight going pear-shaped, and there we go, once again, Huss just completely going off. Libalent are going to have to try a lot harder if they want to get back on this point to really make something of that early progress.
Yeah, and the early progress now has sort of dissipated because Blank Esports take the lead in terms of progress. Blank Esports now take the lead in terms of ultimates as well, and they have the positioning. They can also just do essentially what Flash Wolves did to Libalent last night, which is now keep them in the spawn, keep them in the choke, and not let Libalent Supreme do anything.
Meteor strike out of Huss. One part to save his life, another part to give them an opportunity inward. Gunba popping out the Transcendence to keep this team toasty throughout the fight. Now, no one dead just yet, but Huss, there we go, getting picked up by Celine. They really need to leverage something out of this, but Libalent have no ultimates remaining now. Actually, Pepper does just get his pulse bomb up, but they lose Darriton. Trade with Trill. There we go. That's the one they need out of Hotade, looking to get very deep on this now. Edu up continues playing the discipline play here, just kind of ducking around the side, trying to take little bits off here and there where he can. Good self-destruct. Zones Libalent off and stalls the cap out. Now, Blank actually, they would want to stall here in any case, but they actually could potentially regroup if they get some kills through. Not if Hotade has anything to say about it, though. And that should be Blank just pushing it up towards 90 before the cap goes over, but it will go over to Libalent.
Yeah, inevitably, Libalent finally get this one done, and it's really interesting because for Blank Esports, that shouldn't have been a fight they were going to lose. 5 ultimates up against what was about 2 ultimates.
Yeah.
They just didn't get enough value once again. This is a big spending thing. They save up to the 5 and 6. They spend about 5 or maybe even the 6, but not often do they actually win those kind of fights, and that's really interesting because they're winning fights when they don't have ults, and they're losing fights when they do.
And it was odd because Huss had to use Meteor Strike to stay alive, so they decided, okay, it's already been used, let's leverage it, which meant Gunba actually had to use Transcendence, and they just really ran out of resources, and that's starting to hurt them now as Huss is really all they've got to go on, and no backup from Gunba or Trill, and he was close to that Transcendence. Huss gets picked out, and Libalent in the driver's seat here. They use the ultimates they had at their disposal, but they're still relatively even in terms of charge to Blank, and they held out for that important fight.
So now here comes Blank Esports because 2 defensive ultimates about to come back online. Blank inevitably will have one more chance to get a decent string of ultimates to actually challenge the Libalent Supreme. They're at this sort of stage now where maybe they have a buffer of 20% where they can make that happen. If not, the cap's just going to go over to Libalent Supreme once again, which, you know, by the way, they have the cap already, but what I mean is actually just going to win off it.
That's really big. That actually means, oh, good trade back though onto Pepper. So now that Gunba's on his way back in, they're just going to go ahead and commit to the fight. Sound barrier out to get onto the point. They need to get pressure on Hotade, and they do so, but he smacks down Trill as best as he can. They're getting the pressure on now as Darriton picked off, and Trill does stay alive through that. Gunba and RQT are working overtime here. Look at how healthy Blank still look as Huss is starting to really go off on the point now. They had to pause for that brief moment when Gunba got picked, but the crucial trade back onto Pepper gave them that window, and it did go up towards overtime, but it's looking like Libalent aren't going to get on this. Ooh, last ditch from Pepper does buy them overtime, but they are at a numerical disadvantage as they come onto the point. Now both their ultimates out already, the Sound Barrier and Primal Rage both. Transcendence out of Gunba, and Huss going to cut off the healers on the backline, forces the Transcendence from Selene, picks Hotade. That's a big one for them, and now Libalent very lean on DPS. They do pick off Gunba, but Blank look like they have this one well controlled now from start to finish. Just need to close out on Pepper. That's one way to do it. They lose Trill, but all's well that ends well. Jasper demeched will get taken out, and that will be the first map going over to Blank.
But 99 to 99, I mean, that was an incredibly tight series, and where that really changed for me was Libalent Supreme had the control of the point for a very long time in the second part of that game. In the middle section, they lost it at roughly 90. But that's the 20% buffer I'm talking about. At the 70-ish kind of percent, that's when Blank Esports had that reset. They were just waiting for a couple of extra ultimates to come back online. 2 of them that they were getting were the 2 defensive ultimates. Going in at the roughly 90% mark, they actually got that quite cheaply. RQT's Sound Barrier, they didn't use very much of anything else, and they won that fight. Very opposite to what actually happened earlier when Blank lost the fight. They gave the cap over to Libalent in the first place, which was about, what, 5 or 6 ultimates used, and they didn't win. So this is that very interesting dynamic of Blank. They're sort of winning when they're behind and losing when they're ahead. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. And actually, I do want to compliment them for one thing, and that's when they lost Gunba, they actually looked for a counter pick so that they could maybe try and go in. A lot of teams would have just taken it on the chin and backed off, had to go in very, very last ditch in overtime. So good play there, but let's see out the gate. Looking to position very aggressively, but they do need to cover their sides as they do so because Libalent kind of have control over the side building. If Blank book it for the point, they could come back to bite them, but picking Darrington hurts Libalent's ability to book it for the point. So they're just going to have to back off.
This can really change if Atade finds something very quickly, but you're right, they are just going to back that one off, and that's interesting. Libalent don't usually back off like that, I feel, in the previous engagements that we've seen.
Well, that's a good
Libalent
pick.
do like to go for the counter trades if they can make it, but they're not finding anything, and they're still bleeding members. They're bleeding a lot of members.
80 up, one clipping Pepper was huge there. Selene was actually still in that building from the opening push. He hadn't been able to back off where the rest of Libalent had, but actually him going down and then Pepper as well has opened up this route here, and Blank are going to be able to extend their lead and build an ultimate advantage off the back of that. So actually, Libalent retreated well and still somehow end up the worst.
Oh, be careful. We know what happens when Blank get a lead. They find somehow to throw it away. So let's actually see if Blank are able to get this lead, hold on to this lead, and really drag it up. You want to see Blank get up to about the 80% mark. At least off this push, you want to get maybe 50 to 60%. That's when Blank want to get comfortable.
Watch for Ediop's pulse bomb because that could be all they need to open it right out. And he's been very strong in the one clip. He gets eaten. That's big. And that forces out the Transcendence from Gunba so they can stay in the fight. But they pick Kasuke, so it is all worth it for now. Huss just going to use this to zone out. Going to make it as difficult as Libalent, to position properly on the point. Countered by Hotade. That was well done, but Huss is able to retreat as they're getting the kills on the back line and the front line. Ediop is all over the fight. Who were even getting one in there for good measure? And this is going to be the route as well as they demech Jasper. Blank, they are really starting to push this lead out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Libalent Supreme spent ultimates there as well. You had Selene use Transcendence. You had Hotade use Meteor Strike. The interesting interaction of Meteor Strike is you actually want to be the second Doomfist to Meteor Strike so you can land on top of the first one. That's exactly what happened to Huss, but Hotade just couldn't clean up the kills. No one from Libalent Supreme was there to help them either, so they're still behind, now going to the 80% mark. Libalent Supreme, this should be the last fight for them. If they don't win it here, Blank just take it.
And something smart Huss did was he drew Hotade away from the fight. Hotade needed to be in it more than Huss did, but Huss is now not in this fight as he gets picked off at the top, picking Hugo as well, who was actually not able to get back in his mech. This is the fight that Libalent needed. It will go all the way up to 99% here for Blank for sure, but Blank are all going to fall down. Did even commit an ult to that, so Libalent, much needed fight, have some ult charge in the pocket, but Blank have plenty of time to pull it back around.
And most importantly, a really cheap fight. Only Pulse Bomb got used there. Didn't even see if Pepper got a kill. Didn't really matter. At the end of the day, it ended up being Hotade managing to get kills on a good number of members. Huss going down early was a big factor as well. You look back at where we saw in night markets, Huss was the first one that died in the initial fight that really put Libalent Supreme in the lead in the first place. So that has been one of the factors for Libalent Supreme to get into this game.
Yeah, they live and die by Huss, but this is a very good push by Blank. They're just kind of cutting off Libalent, who now can't even retreat to their own points. They're just going to have to try and make a stand and fight on this bridge. Defensive ultimate's already out from them in form of both now the Transcendence and Sound Barrier. In fact, Sound Barrier is soon to be available for Blank, and that could be all they need to tip the balance. Is Huss ready to go in now? Meteor Strike up, and actually I think he was second this time around. Actually no, Hotade's still second, but Hotade is using it defensively. Huss able to retreat, picks off Selene there, Trill, and that's what they need now as he binds Darrington on the reaggress. Yeah, no primal unfortunately used out of him, and Libalent a little too scattered off the back end of that, did not respect the mobility that Huss could still bring to the table, and kind of let themselves get a bit separated as Hotade went sky high with the Meteor Strike. That's the regrab for Blank, 99% already. Last ditch in for Darrington. He gets the Primal Ridge this time. Actually, this could buy them just enough time, but they need to actually leverage that time. Darrington's already dead, and the rest of the team hesitated with the follow-up. Now it's Jasper in, and now it's starting to look like trickle deaths. Indeed it is, as Jasper and Hotade both get picked. Transcendence for good points. Style points out of Gunba. I know Gunba points. It's like a new cryptocurrency. And Pepper last ditch is going to go down before long. That should be the cap. Wow, that's a real grab, real dash for the point is what I'm trying to say. But Blank winning.
Blank had a lot of resources there. I feel like for Libalent Supreme, they're one shot at keeping the point
That's the term I was looking for. Dragged it out.
Well, I'm glad we got that.
I don't know how I got grabbed.
What really lost it for me for Libalent Supreme was Darden not using the Primal Rage to start with. That would have really kept the point alive for a little bit longer. You had the sort of moment for Libalent Supreme where they started to trickle back on point. You actually want to be able to come on together as a team, but when you're in the face of defeat at 99-0, or rather 99% going into the overtime, You just have to make a mad dash for that cap.
Yeah.
And that was definitely a far cleaner game from Blank than what we saw on Night Markets. Something that is still concerning was, at least on Night Market, still losing that initial fight, that initial engagement that we saw from Blank's debut against Machi Esports on Lijiang Tower. For one reason or another, they do not win that opening engagement. And then you look at Gardens and they finally do. They put themselves very far into the lead. So, you know, that's partially why I think it was a much cleaner game for Blank. Had they not have won that first engagement, we would have seen a closer series from Libalent Supreme again.
It was a really interesting moment there as well towards the very end of Gardens. And I very briefly was able to mention it, but kind of want to put a bit more detail into that. So this was right in overtime where Blank were about to cap it out, right? Libalent only had 5 members up, right? Darrington jumped onto the point to buy them the overtime. He popped his ultimate, his Primal Rage, to buy them even more time. Now look at the rest of the members of Libalent that were alive. You had a Tracer, you had a Doomfist, you had a Diva, right? Your healer would have taken a while to get there, but that's always going to be the case. Now, those other 3 members could have gone for the point with Darrington, with the time that he was buying, with the displacement that he was bringing to the table. And that was the best fight you were going to get. A 4 versus 6 that was soon to become a 5 versus 6 when your healer did catch up to the fight, right? That was your best option. And they didn't actually take it. Darrington went in alone, and then he died, and then Jasper went in. And they kind of let themselves trickle instead of going for a proper fight.
So this is going to be onto Night Markets, and Blank by this stage have already flipped the cap around. They won that second fight, and they look to be securing the third fight as well. Hus did go down rather early here.
Yes,
I'm not
this is the
mistaken.
flip back around.
If I'm not mistaken, it shouldn't be the flip around just yet because Blank take this one very high up in the percentage mark. So this was still a very long fight.
Yeah, they drag it out, and that was because of where the fight took place, and then they weren't all dead when Libalent made for the point, but Libalent had the numbers advantage to get onto the point safely, and then it was just a case of picking off the members of Blank. Blank still were able to extend it out all the way up to that kind of 90% mark, and that's the kind of trade-off you have there. Like, okay, yes, you lost the fight, but because of how it all played out, you had the ability to do that between, I believe it was Huru and I Eat You Up. Certainly I Eat You Up was involved, but just the more mobile kind of members there. And that all actually came off the back of, and I mentioned this during the game as well, Hus using the Meteor Strike. He had to use it to stay alive, so they decided let's leverage it anyway. And it's sort of like they probably got the best out of a bad situation once the fight was a losing fight for them, but they certainly didn't get the best possible outcome out of the situation, given that with what they had going into it, they probably should have been able to win the fight, but Hus just got a little bit too low, and maybe they should have actually let him die, pull back, and hold it for a 5v6 with Hus rejoining in a moment.
And that was still a very close Night Market nonetheless. So 99 to 99 was the result of that one. I feel like Libalent Supreme definitely had the edge over Blank in multiple different scenarios. Hus going down early has been the catalyst, at least for me, for where Libalent have managed to find their holes into the Blank side. And that's kind of where I think Hong Kong Attitude really had the openings against Blank as well. So something going on there where predominantly Hus going down. And actually, you see the impact it has on a player like IEU, especially in that very first fight on Night Market, where Hus went down, IEU up trying to really keep the game alive, and he's basically doing the kind of job that DM does for Erster on the Ardian side, which Erster goes down, and DM just keeps the game alive entirely for Ardian. IEU up tries to do that, actually gets Jasper's mech, so that's when things start to turn around for Blank a little bit. They get the reinforcements, they come back and they win the second fight. That second fight that Blank won, very important. Had they lost their second fight, I think the momentum would have shifted to Libalent Supreme's favor in a really big way, and they would have been able to take that a little bit further. Here we go, and this is going to be now onto Gardens.
Yeah, so this is just sort of a continued win, and honestly, really this is all just from the fact that it gets drawn out for a very long time. There are a lot of resources on the side of Libalent Supreme, but you'll see Hus and Hotade both use their Meteor Strikes, and we mentioned this. Hus has drawn Hotade away from the fight by now, and what that meant is Libalent started trying to pull back to where Hotade was. Hus used his mobility to regroup with his team. Hotade couldn't move to anywhere because his team was moving to him, and that actually meant he was a sitting duck, and while his team was moving, they weren't covering the retreat, and it's just this really interesting little situation where because even though he was lower and even though he was technically behind enemy lines, because Hus was moving and Hotade wasn't, Hus stayed alive. Hotade, his team was getting picked off while they were moving to him. And you wonder if actually Libalent would have been better off holding just for that moment, waiting for Hotade to kind of rejoin the fight, because Doomfist can still get a kill as he's going back in towards your team. That's just how his abilities work. And if not, the team doesn't have to give up the position, they don't have to retreat, and it was actually the retreat that left them vulnerable to the other members of Blank, which was why the fight started going the way it did. And it's just this really interesting dynamic because, in a sense, Hotari got the better of the two ultimates because he was able to go second and nearly killed Huss with it, but when that didn't go off, I feel like from there, Libalent didn't quite know what to do to recover the situation.
And Libalent Supreme do get the next map pick, so maybe the recovery we're looking here is not going to be on Lijiang, it's going to be on King's Row instead. Of course, they are the away team. That means they get the hybrid pick and the escort pick, which is map number 4. Blank Esports has the home team get control, the assault in the middle, and also the hybrid right at the end as well. So we are going to the very standard Lijiang directly into King's Row.
Yeah, this is it's pretty normal. This is the tour. That's what this is. It's like you get on a bus and it's just got a predetermined route. This is the tour of OPC. You know, you get on a plane, it goes to China and it goes to the UK, and then from there it gets a little bit different. It depends on which one you go on, which bus you get on. But generally speaking, we'll go to Russia. Sometimes we go to Egypt.
We had a lot of Temple of Anubis last season, but not so much this season. It's been mainly mainly Horizon and mainly.
We haven't seen any Hanamura. Or have we seen it once, maybe?
No, we haven't seen any Hanamura. You're absolutely right. And the team that actually really wants to go to Hanamura, it'll be between AHQ and Flash Wolves. Those are the two teams that, if history is correct from OPC season 1, really like to go to that map.
You know, I feel like there is, just while we're kind of on that topic, there is something else at play with the reason for that. And I think at the time, AHQ and Flash Wolves both were still getting used to Sombra. Whereas if you look at teams like especially Hong Kong Attitude were very quick at picking up the Sombra, felt very natural with it. I'd say Blank did a reasonable job of picking up the Sombra as well. And I think Flash Wolves and AHQ both were a little bit slower on the pickup. Certainly both had it fairly, they had it up to scratch by the time they reached playoffs. And I think that may have been a bit of a driver for why they were going to Hanamura so often, but that's also conjectural. It's a previous season, that is a different time and a different place. This here and now is King's Row, and like you said, Libalent's opportunity to push it back, and we've actually we saw them have, to be honest, a really good showing on Hong Kong Attitude. What? On King's Row, compared to Hong Kong Attitude versus Flash Wolves.
Well, they beat Flash Wolves, right? And that's the really important thing to note. Well, actually, Hong Kong Attitude already beat Blank on this. And, without going back to the crime scene and drawing the red dots again and really...
I think this one would be fair enough to do. Like, actually, that's pretty direct evidence to say Hong Kong Attitude couldn't beat Flash Wolves on King's Row. Libalent could. Hong Kong Attitude could beat Blank on King's Row. You honestly can't help but feel like Libalent can just beat Blank here.
It's definitely possible, and I think Libalent have a couple of different tools. They did both Hotari on Doomfist and Hotari on the Genji that was really effective here. The other thing I actually want to talk about, which is a little bit more meta, is you have to remember there's a little bit more history between the two teams because in the World Cup, it was Darjan and Jasper versus Blank, and now it's Darjan and Jasper versus Blank again, but in the OPC. So
yeah, only the rest of the team is a little different, i.e. completely different. In any case, Blank on the defense first. That's actually Libalent opting to attack. And Blank are actually running the Soldier Doomfist combo, a combo we don't have a name for yet. So
it's because I don't like the combo.
Good pick. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what I was about to say is generally this has been the weakest of the potential Doomfist DPS duos. So Gaiman getting picked early gives Libalent a lot of space here. Huss as well going down. They do trade back, but Trill going down. This should be Libalent's cap here.
Absolutely, Chop's going to try and keep this one alive, but I just don't know how he can do that on Soldier. He's not going to have enough space to work with. He doesn't have the teammates to help him here. He's not going to be a Tracer where he can just keep the point going and maybe find a pickoff. He's actually pretty stuck here. You have the Discord all stuck on him for a long sort of time. Jasper tried to look for him as well, and just no one's going to be able to come back. And the good news for Blankers, they're not going to make the same mistake as Flash Wolves and go for some last-ditch play on the cap that would lose them a lot of momentum. In fact, they're going to go for something a little bit more sneaky.
Yeah, this is a spicy wrap around. See if it pays off, because actually Jasper spotted it out, gets some good damage onto Trill. He does get himself topped up here a little, but it means they have to kind of move back around. Good pressure onto Hotare, so they are going to get a chance to fight here. A little bit earlier in the streets phase, which is pretty ideal for them, but they need to actually convert something out of that fight. The opportunity is one thing, The execution is another. Transcendence out of Selene, and immediately Libalent convert onto Trill, and already looking a little bit rough for Blank, who we picked as well very quickly, and that's just going to be Blank in full retreat. Libalent going to take up the space so they can move the cart in safety.
And this is the kind of momentum that they used to beat the Flash Wolves, and Blank Esports already on the back foot here. In fact, when we saw Blank Esports against Hong Kong Attitude, you got a little bit of a taste of this as well. Hong Kong Attitude, different composition that they used to beat Blank Esports. Libalent Supreme, they're running essentially what they ran against Flash Wolves to keep themselves going. Huss got taken quite early in that first engagement. He has to be the last one to die here, if at all.
And look at the ultimates Libalent have up. That is a good pick onto Hotade, but yeah, again, already Huss down. I Eat You Up is the only major ultimate they have the leverage now. They need to get a lot out of this. Oh, great pulse bomb onto I Eat You Up. So that is off the table. They do get the closer respawn though, so Huss can rejoin this fight just a little bit faster than Hotade, but again, it's all going to be about the conversion. They commit all their ultimates into this. The self-destruct Primal Rage and Sound Barrier has been out. And the Nano Burst. Gunva already getting pressured back by Darrington though, so it might not really count for much. Oh, Darrington actually is going to go down for his trouble. Couldn't quite close out the kill, but that's allowed them some movement on the cart itself, so Blank still need to get back onto that and pressure it. They're not on the cart. It gets capped over as they try and continue the fight, and now as they flag out a retreat, they're just going to lose members as they pull back. That is about as pear-shaped as it can possibly go.
Yeah, call that one B9. That was really unfortunate for Blank Esports, and they even had the tactical visor as well. They had a couple of the tools. They just killed Hotate. Members were going back on there. Huss was roughly around the cart, the area of the cart, but not directly on the cart. And unfortunately for Blank Esports, Libalent Supreme continue pushing this one on through, and they didn't really get punished despite the fact that Blank Esports was starting to turn it around.
Sorry, B9? I don't get it.
You don't know C9?
Oh yeah, but like, what does that have to do with going pear-shaped? Anyway, Hotade already looking to get aggressive on Huwu. Doesn't quite demag him. He's barely able to retreat. Selene popping out the Transcendence so they can keep going aggressive. Eat You Up is opening up, and he does get one. It's a trade back for Trill, though, so he's not going to get much more. Now the team just backing off to wait it out. They're looking to get back into this one as soon as they get Darrington back with the team.
So there's a good level of stabilization here now for Blank Esports.
Oh.
And in fact, a little bit better than stabilization. This should just make Libalent Supreme back off just a little bit. Libalent Supreme are not going to do anything to try and get a counter trade here. They have a lot of time to play with, so I think you can afford to be a little bit more patient with your gameplay.
Patient is a good way to put it. They've got the time, and they've actually got ultimates to kind of go on already. Picking themselves up, and Ana as well. Valuing the Nano Boost for the situation. Gunva going to use his Nano Boost. Is that onto Huss there? Actually, indeed it is. He's not getting much for it just yet. He does, Trill losing his life there. Gunva gets one for them, but it's probably not going to be enough right now. Yeah, Huss as well getting picked off, so now they're just relying sheer on respawn advantage as Gunva goes down as well. Hotade suddenly realizes he doesn't have any targets except for Huwu, who just got demagged, so he's going to go ahead and take that one gladly. Blank now, it's going to be into the last ditch portion of the game, as they only have 5 members. They have to get onto the payload. Pulse Bomb out does get Gunva. Sound Barrier does see the rest of the team safely to the payload, but they're in a 4 versus 6 now. Huwu now rejoining the team, but Sound Barrier out for Libalent. They've got plenty of staying power in this one. Huss needs to get something out of this ultimate, but he doesn't really get enough. He's just going to have to back off, try and duck in and out of this fight. I Eat You Up going to try and rejoin the fray as well by wrapping around the other side, but Darrington getting more still. Eat You Up finally opens up with the ultimate, and there might just be the stabilization as Huwu catches Hotade, and the tactical visor does close out on Keisuke. Last ditch turns out to be all they need. This is about as slim a stabilization as they get, but it gives Blank a little bit more of a chance.
And man, that was so dangerous for Blank Esports. The Pulse Bomb catching Gunva right in the spawner, they're really hurting Blank's chances, but it definitely came down to the fact that Huwu got a kill with the self-destruct. Eat You Up then had the room to use Act Visor, clean up a bunch of other members while Libalent Supreme were backing off, and now we're going to see the combo that beat Blank the first time. When Hong Kong Attitude took King's Row off them, this is exactly what they used.
Just the extra pressure that can come out of this, and yeah, really great at shutting down some of those DPS members. Let's see if Pepper can have a similar performance on the creep.
He gets the headshots that Mui was getting yesterday. I think it's definitely a sure deal. Jasper's
already
on 100.
yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. I think for Blank Esports, they really can't make any mistakes.
That's really what it was.
It's coming out as well.
That's really what it was yesterday, actually, for Hong Kong Attitude. It was Randy on the Zarya, but they are able to go aggressive with that Transcendence, but Huwu, a little bit too far forward, gets demexed by the hand of Hotade, who is now going very deep looking for Gunva, who's got nowhere to hover to, and he gets the pick off. Huwu goes down as well. They do get some trade backs, though, and that could just barely keep them in it as Huss rejoin, but yeah, nearly grab, and Jasper, so much charge. keeps people off the payload. No final contest going to come out. What they did get to do was run out the clock a little bit more than they maybe otherwise would have, but Blank are not going to hold it all together. They now have to push it to Time Bank if they want a chance.
That was a strong push out of, I want to say both pushes that nearly made, the one that nearly made it to the camp and the one that actually did, both were very good out of Libalent Supreme. The only correction I want to make is that last grab was actually on the card itself, so if anything, that was probably going to help Blank contest it further, so maybe grab away from the card, I don't know. Look at that one later, Jasper, but he was at 100 charge for most of that fight. He just switched onto the Zarya as well, getting 100 charge, immediately getting a grab before the fight even ended. I mean, he was doing a lot of work. We have to talk about the fact that now, this is something that has been very effective against Blank, and you have to also consider that the fact that Libalent Supreme completely changed the composition anyway, at about the 2-minute mark, I mean, no ultimates to play with. They're going in completely clean. They were maybe even expected, if they don't win that fight, they have a little bit of time to charge. If they got the ultimate charges, they would have been playing in the overtime. So the fact that they got it in the first push is actually quite significant.
I think you said it in there as well. Libalent got an amazing push, really from start to finish, actually. Their take at the first point was in a first push situation. They had a lot of momentum throughout the streets phase, and only really got stopped up significantly right at the very end there. It did feel very last ditch out of Blank. So that is really the bar being set, and it's now up to Blank to meet it and indeed potentially raise it. And they do certainly have the aptitude, the ability, but we have seen them struggle as well. In fact, a slightly slower performance on the whole could be the difference between a successful Time Bank and an unsuccessful one.
Let's see what Blank going to pull out for this one, and it looks like the Ryan Zarya combo that we've sort of seen a lot more of now going into King's Roar, but
all right,
Blank Esports, I think they got a tough time to beat.
Everyone, say your prayers to Trill, smasher of good ults. Let's see if he can smash a few good ones out here.
I was just kind of behind here. He's with his team.
Wasn't able to move with the team, and then Pepper keeping him kind of locked down. So now the rest of Blank has to move to kind of catch Huss up. And Pepper is still just trying to make that as difficult as possible, but now Huss rejoining the team. Does stall them a little bit for time, but they are at least grouped up and now have the opportunity to get going.
You don't want to be caught up here, though. You don't want to just get stuck.
That's aggressive. Darrington has a Primal Rage already, so he's just using that to kind of throw Blank into disarray, and it works as they pick Huss in among that, and getting aggressive now into the small room here, but charging against the wall. Darrington pays for it with his life, and they already traded back onto the DPS as Libalent actually split themselves up, getting greedy for kills. The respawns favor Blank. A little bit slower than Libalent's first push, but they are going to get it effectively in that first single push.
I think Darrington overcommitted there. I think he played directly into Trill, who got the really great pin. Without that pin, I don't know what would have happened really for Darrington, but he didn't have enough help there anyway, so I don't know what he was expecting to get in. Maybe pin everyone, maybe just bash everyone against the wall, stop them from contesting the card itself, or the point itself, but it just didn't really work out for Libalent Supreme, and now the card went through.
Huss, just heal me. He's actually gonna have to go back to his healers. That was great for a moment. Stands there, takes some bullets, and then instantly spams heal me, heal me. To be a DPS.
Yeah, that's building up support ultimates for you.
Speaking of building up ultimates, Trill has that Earth Shatter, that good ult. Let's see if he can connect it. He's still looking for it. That would have been so sick, but he's actually staying disciplined. They want to get a bit more pressure on the cart first, and Pepper getting picked is good. They don't actually need to use that ultimate. They just have the threat of it, and that threat zone out of the Reinhardt is doing work because Libalent had to commit the Transcendence so that they could stay in the fight. Gunbear has a closer spawn, and Eat You Up is actually not being touched right now. They're tunnel visioning on all these other members. Eat You Up is just sitting pretty on the side, now picks off Darrington. Jasper dies while he's using the self-destruct, and just with the threat of that ultimate and no resources committed, Blank forced all those ults out of Libalent.
They did use that one sound barrier, but that was because Trill nearly died. So for Blank Esports, pretty cheap take overall, and you'll probably take that one. It's definitely a very valued push coming out from Blank. I definitely feel like they probably could have used that Earth Shatter anyway. It looked like a really good one that he had lined up, but ultimately didn't need it. Huss got a lot of kills in there, and if Huss is starting to get kills, well, now he can just clean the rest of the team up.
You know, sometimes like you spot it, and then by the time you've thought, oh, I could have altered, it's a bit too late. But Huss already going aggressive, nearly pays for it with his life, so he's going to have the Meteor Strike to safety. And by safety, I mean that Lucio's healing zone. He misses it all, but he's able to stay alive as Gunbear gets Hotade with the same bio grenade that was healing Huss. Now they're looking to get Darrington through that Primal Rage. That's Trill Smasher, good ults connecting with the ground there. Does lose his life, but it doesn't matter. They've got the pressure that they need. Actually, Edu Up is in kind of full retreat here. They need to get a little bit more out of who is still alive. Where is he Pixie trying to get the damage on Jasper. There they go, demeching the man himself. Don't quite have the payload over the line though, so actually Libalent got just enough members off the Blank side there. They bought themselves some breathing room, but now Blank pushing back in. There we go, eat you up, staying alive through that pays off for them. And now the pick on Darrington as well will be the payload pushing over the line.
And Pepper really needed to pressure EU up a little bit more there. He needed to keep EU up out of the fight. And Trill, look, he landed a hammer onto, I think he landed onto both tanks there, but he cleaned up one of the supports maybe on the side that didn't really get the biggest Earth Shatter, just got enough to kind of pave Libalent Supreme off for the time being, but Eat Up staying alive on the side there was definitely very important.
Huss. Oh, again. All right, Eat You Up is going to try and equalize this one for his team, and actually not going to happen at all. Trill goes down. In fact, how about we just all die? I think that's the Blank plan here. Solidarity with Huss, boys.
You now have gone from one ultimate being used to the one that you did use in that one very nice take into Archway to the only ultimate you actually have alive. So Libalent Supreme, they might have lost the second cap, they might have lost Streets phase, but they're very much now ahead. Let's see what Libalent Supreme can do with this lead that they now have.
Oh, they're going to throw a Pulse Bomb into the mix, and oh dear, that is unfortunate. Runs it back into Huss, and the follow-up is there as well. And the only ultimate they needed to use, actually did use the self-destruct in there as well, so never mind. But again, very low economy fights here. But Blank do have their own coming online now.
So we're going to talk about time a little bit. The card distance isn't too great for Blank.
Oh, Hotade! That's a great pick by Who. We've kind of thread the needle with the beam at the end. And maybe all they need to get this one back underway.
So we're talking about time here because the card still hasn't really moved that far in terms of distance. We're at sort of the 3-minute mark now. Blank Esports do get those ultimates back online. You want to get a good graph here to start the move. You don't want to overcommit. You don't want to overcommit too many ults because you still have a lot of distance to cover.
Libalent using a lot of ultimates, and yeah, Blank have held on to their ones. The only one they committed there actually was the sound barrier, so similar situation to what we saw before. Now actually Huwu, a reasonable amount of charge plus the grav coming up. Libalent will get a full run of respawns, but they don't have a lot of resources to go on here.
It's definitely flipped the tables, and I think I tried to spot it out. Huss, if you can get a nice pick on the Huss, this could really change things up, but you have to be careful of who is grabbing. It shouldn't be coming out.
And there it is. Hotade is right in the thick of it, cannot meet your strike to safety, which means he actually does get to keep that ultimate, but the pick-offs are there as Pepper gets dropped. Eat You Up, taking out this mech if he's careful, and he should be able to stay alive on that point there. And that means Jasper isn't on the payload, now has to die for it, but it's too late, and there we go. That is a good time for Blank there. Just a little bit over, under a minute, ahead of the Libalent cap time. That was actually a lot faster than Libalent in the end, even though it felt like Libalent had more momentum.
I felt like Libalent had more high-impact fights that let them get a lot of really good distance there. I think Blank overall just won more fights. I think Libalent Supreme had a lot of fights that they did lose, but in the fights that they did win, they got really decent distance, especially when you look at the last couple of fights right at the end there. They had a fight which kind of really pushed them all the way to the final distance of the cart, and then just came back, swapped their entire composition, and won it off that. So for Blank Esports, they kept that one composition running the entire way through. It did actually end up paying off, and I think there's a few key moments there where Blank had a really cheap fight where RKG sound barriered under the archway. They won that with only one ultimate. They pushed on for a decent amount of distance as well, had a lot of ultimates to push on through. Then you had a really key moment where Eat You Up stayed alive, had Attack Visor running in that fight as well, and just, you know, really pulling their weight all this place.
All right, well, about a minute and a half here for Libalent Supreme, and because of the narrowness of that time frame, one good hold on this first point for Blank could actually be all they need to really get themselves ahead for what will then be their own attack. But Libalent definitely can do a fast cap once again, so let's see if they can dig deep, channel the same chakra as before. I'm not a very spiritual person. And out the gate, they roll, looking to get aggressive.
It is the same composition now coming out from Blank Esports though, so for Libalent Supreme, I don't know if they're going to get the same momentum that they got off that first cap. They're going to need to. I think for Libalent Supreme, if they want to win this, getting a cap and getting maybe halfway through the Streets phase, maybe just towards the end of Streets phase, even if they don't cap, that's going to be good progress.
Good maneuver out by Blank to sort of move back to the other side of this point, but it means Libalent are on it, so Blank actually have to attack onto themselves again. Huss, the first to go down. Eat You Up picked as well, and they aren't really able to probably regroup. They're not pulling the right weight here, as Hotade is having free reign now over this very opened up tank line, and that's the fast enough push for Libalent Supreme here. 45 seconds remaining as they clean up. The last few members are Blank. The rest are only just respawning. That should be the cap through. Unless Blank want to try and draw out the clock even further, but now they actually need to stop Libalent playing for distance.
Blank need to be able to play the bookshop area right now. That's incredibly important. Like, you can actually see the silhouettes. They're starting to set up around this corner. And for Libalent Supreme, they got to get past this corner. If they can get past this corner, then you start to really challenge the Streets Face cap. If you can get the second cap, this becomes really deadly. But even if they don't, if they just push the cart near that cap, I think they've made enough distance to maybe defend against Blank the other way around.
Yeah, this one fight is going to determine a lot. If Libalent win it, they can get a lot of distance. If Blank win it, it'll be a tiny distance that they need to reach. And now, as the overtime comes up, it is go time. Pepper going deep, has not quite got anyone, but Hustler first to go down. Trey back on a Doten. There's the ult from Trill. It's a good one, but no conversion as the Transcendent saves the knockdown members of Libalent. Trill is very low in the thick of it here. Who will try to get the grab, and he does get a good one out. They need to convert off it, and again, they can't just seem to get the kills through. Sound barrier to save the members of Libalent, but RQT matches it. Payload has been underway for a good percentage of this fight, though, so this is extra distance for Libalent as now Huss rejoins the fight. He needs to convert as Humu gets Keisuke, and Huss is in the thick of it. Punches back Darrington, who is forced to use the primal rage rather, and they're getting a little bit out of this. The payload hasn't moved just yet, but they are closing these members of Blank, but Blank are not going down without a fight either. Huss on top of the payload, and that could be all they need to stabilize. Self-destruct now from Jasper, and there's just so much in the pocket because the fight's gone on so long, but it's Huwu at the end of it all who has that charge, who has the aim, and still has plenty of health on that health bar, is going to be the one to get the 3K there to help Blank secure that one. That is a very beatable distance for Blank.
Unfortunately for Libalent Supreme, it is. Look, they needed to get a little bit more than that. They needed to just be shy of the second cap, if not capping it at all, to actually be very competitive. So I think for Blank, this suddenly becomes a lot more winnable. You have to be able to commend the grab that came out from Uru, because that caught just about everyone right at the end there. Huss used a media strike just beforehand, really cleared Hatare off, really injured Hatare, not let him come back into the fight, not easily. Anyway, the grab then picks up a lot more members. Uru gets a triple kill with a lot of energy charge as well. We just needed to see more kills from Libalent Supreme. They were just lacking in some of the kills there, and if they did, maybe they overpower Blank, because right where that yellow circle with the yellow rectangle is, right where the cast light stood, that still actually favors Libalent Supreme spawn rather than Blank spawn.
Yeah, and they lasted out through what was a lot of the most pivotal ultimates as well, the Earth Shatter and the Graviton both. And they didn't even have a Transcendence by the time the Graviton came out. They were just able to last through that, like through sheer force of will almost. I mean, it was actually the work of Jasper on the Diva was a big proponent of them surviving that, but it felt like they had kind of steered through the worst of it, but yeah, like you said, hadn't quite been able to convert those last few kills.
I think the grab was probably the nail in the coffin though, to be honest, because that's when Huru got his triple kill. He got the 2 while the grab ran, and he got the 1 right out the grab as well, while being on super high energy, not enough respawns coming up from Libalent Supreme, and that was the end of their push. So now for Blank, this is the team that we know plays high and bank effectively and to the circumstance. The circumstance is you got to cap, then you got to push for a little bit.
Only thing is, if they do get repelled significantly on one of these early pushes here, they don't really get this point off a first grab, they're going to be very slim for time, so they need to make this one pay off. Coming around the hotel push here is going to be the plan. They've got their flank checked as Pepper tries to poke at it. Hotade as well on the front side. Blank do need to find a good way to fight this way out of this, but they are not crumbling to the probing DPS from Libalent.
The Blank right now are kind of stuck. They're using up a lot of time. If they get
that's
their
good.
Huss going down again.
1 for 1 though, so it's a bit different to before, and they've opened up Darrington. Jasper is separated now from his team, and Eat You Up is in a fairly safe position. Pepper has to now blink through to regroup, and that means Blank had the superior position, can now push onto the point, and once again, the high charge Huwu getting the work done to help close out the fight. That is that 1 push cap that they needed, and a lot more time than Libalent on the clock to get up to that point they need to beat.
And that's really important, because for Libalent Supreme, their win condition was actually to bleed out the clock on first. I don't believe they would have been able to fully hold Blank on first, but if you can make the overtime happen, even a Blank cap, they're going to be pushing into the overtime, and suddenly it becomes winnable. Now, with 1 minute and 7 seconds still, just to get a better card distance right over that, right past the bookshop, I think that's totally doable.
You talked about Blank knowing how to play to the circumstance as well, and they've got the tools to do so. This grab could be huge for them if they can place it well and place it right. And if they demeg Jasper, it could be a free grab, but there we go. Good save.
The lane nearly on
chopped off. Yeah, nearly on
That's
Transcendence is exactly what they need to counter out this grab.
They're nearly on to sound barrier as well, so if they can get both of these.
Oh, that's a big
defensive
one.
ultimates.
They need to get kills off it though, and there is that transcendence. The fight opens out in earnest, and actually Blanca looking the worst for where Hubu desperately trying to get himself top as Eat You Up is forced out of the fight. Huss not converting anything. The payload is kind of being stopped up here. Blank, they either need to convert kills quick smart or back off a quick little moment here and come back in, but Trill commits the Earth Shatter and then dies. They have to kind of go now. They're a little bit too lean on time. They're just relying on respawns to come in, but they're still
Blank are going to trickle.
They are going to trickle if they're not careful here. Darrington making sure they do so with that Primal Rage. They've got time for a last ditch, but it will only be a last ditch.
You've only got one ultimate. It's not going to be the most impactful one either. This is now Blank regrouping, their final chance to regroup. They do come back with a 6, which
That's
means
a good
it's
open.
still winnable.
Gets Hotade with the charge and Huss is into the thick of it. They're totally split and separated now, and they can't make space for their DPS. Pepper is trying to weave around, and there was all it needed to open it up for Blank. Good pulse bomber to Trill to try and even it up, but there's no one really to follow up on it. Hotade is desperately trying to get back into this fight, but Eat You Up is keeping that column pressured. There will be no healer by the time Hotade gets there because Selene has been picked. Now Hotade arrives, pulse bomb from Eat You Up just to try and catch something. This is a good enough stall out of Kisuke, but again, stalling for whom? Hotade finally arriving, and he's got the Meteor Strike out, but he needs to do something with it. He needs to get kills, and he's asleep on the payload. That's all it's going to take now as the trickle will complete for Libalent with Darrington's death, and Blank will take out the win. That actually came down to the wire there, but when it counted, Libalent could not get it through.
And it could have gone either way right at the end there. And you got to really give credit to Libalent Supreme because they nearly held Blank off at about the 20-second mark. They're starting to get kills on Blank. They started on a couple members. Trill, I think, was in the middle of that as well. And then you see the fallback from Blank. That's extremely important. If they fed too many members, if too many members died too far apart from each other, they have too many staggered kills, they don't reinforce together. The way Blank won that was the fact that they came in together as 6, and coming in together as 6 was important. And they killed Hotade. Suddenly the player advantage counts for something.
Yeah, and so this is an interesting thing, by the way, because Hubu got 2 grabs in that fight. So here's the thing. Libalent actually lasted through an Earth Shatter, and they lasted through a grab on the corner of the workshop. And then Hubu got a second grab, which he put on top of the payload, and that was the one you saw just there, and that was where he got that triple kill as well. So just goes to show how long that fight actually went out for, and how long, indeed, I would say Libalent lasted through the defensive tools of Blank. So that was actually really hard fought by Libalent, and I want to identify a key difference between this game and the one where Libalent beat Flash Wolves. And that is Libalent held up Flash Wolves. It didn't go to time bank at all. They didn't quite cap themselves, but they got very, very close and then fully held Flash Wolves before the second point. And that's the key difference here. In this situation, both teams were able to push it all the way through, which to me says actually, offensively, they come off roughly even, given how close the time was. And the difference to me felt like Blank's ability to play to the win condition at the end just a little bit better than Libalent. And it was mainly out of their own defense and how short a distance there was on the cart after the cap went through. That's something that we know Blank are very good at doing.
I actually feel like right at the end there, it almost did come out to, in my opinion, a bit of a total coin flip because the main win conditions for Blank were used up. The grab was already used up right before the final fight. And that was the fight where Selene got the Transcendence in time, was followed up by a sound barrier, and that was quite crucial because both the defensive ultimates being used up by the Libalent Supreme side. Let's take a look at the replay now. This is going to be a little bit earlier. This is the first attack through from Libalent Supreme. And they have I don't think they make too much resistance here. If this is the fight I'm thinking of, Eat Up does get a lot of kills with the Tactical Visor, and that is how Blank managed to stay alive.
Yeah, and you
did die. Does he respawn and get it? Because I know that is how Blank do survive one of these attacks.
He does eventually, but what happens here as well actually is for a lot of this Blank were quite scattered. And you'll see that here again, most of the team had kind of retreated. Trill ended up sort of going in, and there's this, it's not like it's non-committal because they are committing properly, but you can look at how kind of vertically they are spread out here. So they just sort of end up not being on the payload at that crucial moment when they do get the retreat. And yeah, they do end up getting a couple of kills off the tac visor here, I believe. But the cap has gone through by this point. Actually, I think you might even hold it. But the key note there, the key common thing throughout the entire fight for Blank was how scattered they were at the most important moments. And then they'd kind of regroup a bit. Libalent would get distance, and then Blank would go back in, but immediately separate themselves back out as often the backline would kind of retreat again. almost as soon as they had gone in. And, you know, you do that 3 or 4 times, and the payload is just able to creep forward and forward and forward.
Take a look at the next replay now, and this is going to be on the Blank attack. You see 5 ultimates here, so they actually won a really big fight beforehand. And struggling to remember here if Blank win off this push or not. They do get this Earth Shadow, which you want to pay attention on from Trill.
This is the one they win. So what happens here is after the sound barrier, Darrington is 2 kind of split off, and the name of that ultimate, Earth Shatter, is the one stops Libalent from regrouping at the crucial moment where they needed to. Had they regrouped there, they probably would have got a respawn in from Hotade. They probably would have been able to keep Darrington alive to be more of a factor in the fight. He did stay alive, but only because he retreated a long, long way. So a lot of this now is like, sure, Libalent have kind of bought themselves this time, but by the time they're back into it, Blank are very well set up, and that's reflected in EduUp's positioning and the kills he gets through at the end there. And a lot of that just came down to stopping that regroup in that group.
So EduUp actually was separated from the rest of the team, and Pepper was trying to take him down, but couldn't quite get through that biotic field that he had. And EduUp came back, killed Pepper, and killed a bunch of other guys, and you actually see him on that kill feed, like you mentioned, getting that triple that really gave Blank that opening. Let's take a look at the next replay now. This is going to be in, if I'm not mistaken, the time bank period, and this is the attack on through from Libalent Supreme, and they do a decent job of dismantling the Blank defense here. Blank just couldn't really find the picks. I believe Huss went down quite early here as well. And Blank had to make their next hold around the bookshop here. That was really important because, like I sort of mentioned there, if Libalent Supreme got past the bookshop, that's a much more difficult position then for Blank to try and win. But if they don't, Blank can definitely win off that distance.
Yeah, once you're past that bookshop, you're probably going to hold out before the second cap, and that's a lot of distance for you to make up on your own bush. So the interesting thing here actually is Blank were running a very different team comp on the time bank defense to their main phase defense, and still lost it in 1 push. Something is going wrong in these Blank defenses that has nothing to do with the composition, and indeed maybe has everything to do with positioning. It's hard to say exactly, but there are some quite significant things for them, I think, to address, because much like what it was on Libalent's defense in time bank, actually if Blank had held out for an initial push on that defense in time bank, Libalent probably wouldn't have even got as far as the bookshop.
Right, well now Libalent Supreme are down 0-2 into the series. Blank currently lead them. Certainly looking a little bit dire for the Japanese side. The Australians must be feeling a lot better now as we're about to head into Assault Map number 3. And that's all going to happen after this break. Thank you for sticking with us through that break as we're about to head into now Map 3 of Blank Esports versus Libalent Supreme. It's going to be Assault, and also it's going to be Blank's pick as the home team. So here we are, Libalent Supreme now on their last legs, but I think the takeaway that we have here is that actually, I think the series in general has been pretty close. You look at Lijiang, despite it 2-0 there, I want to say pretty close. King's Row came right down to the wire, and possibly even a coin flip right at the end. Yeah,
certainly. Pretty close, but I am actually going to go back to something I did say earlier on in the series, and that is a lot of games so far in this season have been pretty close, and one team has got it over the line, and that's what counts. That's what counts at the end of the day. Yesterday, in Blank series, it was Hong Kong Attitude that got it over the line. Today, right now, it's Blank mostly getting it over the line. Look, maybe that's not going to be the case here on Horizon Lunar Colony, but in any case, Blank's pick, Horizon Lunar Colony, wanting to very much avoid Temple of Anubis, it seems, but also interesting they're not opting into the Volskaya. That has often been their go-to, but certainly if there is a place where Blank are much less consistent at getting it, quote-unquote, over the line, it would be Assault.
And you do have to consider that because they've already dropped this one to Machi. They've dropped it now, obviously, to Hong Kong Attitude, who 3-0'd them. They didn't drop it to Mega Thunder, so that was something that Blank had going for them. And now against Libalent Supreme, King's Row was very close, down to the wire. Yes, Blank got it over the line, but in those final moments, look, anybody could have really gotten over the line. It just happened to be Blank who outplayed Libalent Supreme right when it counted and so forth. Blank, the point there being skating on thin ice, perhaps. Like, how many more times can you be that close to defeat but just manage to pull it out? And that's a very difficult thing for Blank to be sitting on. You don't want to be at the point where you're close to being defeated. You want to be comfortably winning if you're winning. Especially when you are against what is, technically speaking, the last place team. Now, I say technically speaking because we've already kind of mentioned this. Libalent are a lot closer to all of the teams above them in the standings than the standings themselves might suggest. And we have that evidenced by their game win against Flash Wolves last night, even though they didn't take out the match itself. Because Flash Wolves themselves have had some extremely strong showings elsewhere already. They've had some shaky showings, but on the whole, they've looked good. So,
the prime takeaway from this is Blank don't want to lose this series at all. Ideally, they don't want to lose this map, but both of those things are still very, very real possibilities.
I think for Blank, absolutely, you want to be winning this 3-0. That would certainly, have a statement to make.
You don't want to be the team that can only win 3-1.
I think against Flash Wolves as well, because Flash Wolves did drop a map to Libalent Supreme.
Yeah.
You haven't dropped the same map that they did drop. So that's already something that you may be, be feeling quite a lot more comfortable about. Specifically, it is Flash Wolves, and you lost to Flash Wolves in the finals last season. Now you want to come in, you want to be a better team than that. This is starting to look like a bit of a measuring stick, but this is also the third map, not this map specifically, but map 3 is where Flash Wolves really came back in a big way. Blank have come close so far in the series. They need to now be winning in a much larger fashion.
Yeah, and as we say before, and we will always say, Blank, traditionally their toughest map type, or their roughest map type has been Assault, but the early pick on Darriton is good news for this first push out of Libalent at least, and actually part of that was Jasper wasn't quite able to get the, or rather Hotade wasn't able to get the follow-up, so this has a triple tank here, and also Darriton missed his bubble, but nitty-gritty aside, Blank hold.
They're holding quite aggressively too. You notice they're not stacking on either the left side room or the battlements on the right. They're just making sure they check out where Libalent Supreme are going to come from, and then they go for the surround. Trill's going to come in from the back. Husk can go in wherever he likes. The converging on Libalent Supreme is the game plan. They are looking to execute that.
Very much on the point itself now, so Blank are going to have to attack onto it. They don't want to let Libalent just kind of take this ground. This triple tank is really starting to exert a lot of pressure as well. Husk doesn't have a lot of targets he can just pick out quickly. Neither does Eat You Up, but a pulse bomb onto Darriton, will do just that. Hotade and Jasper both getting pressured back. Actually, it's Pepper who goes down before Hotade, but Hotade's going to get D-Max on the back end, and that's going to lose a lot of time for Libalent. This is starting to look like a very strong first point defense for Blank.
I think Eat You Up really opened that one up as well with a nice pulse bomb kill that really kind of tore up the mid lane of Libalent Supreme, and Jasper didn't really know what he wanted to do there. He had high charge, 90 out of 100, and that's a lot of damage, but he just didn't really have the health to keep himself going. We talk about the fact that Blank Esports was looking for the surround play onto Libalent Supreme. They absolutely did get that.
Quick swap now from Libalent. They feel the triple tank is not working. Jasper's going to be going back onto the Diva and Hotade back onto the Doomfist. So let's see if this is going to fare a little bit better for them as they instantly put a nano boost onto Darriton, who needs to convert something out of this, but he's having a bit of a hard time. Sound barrier out for Blank, and Hotade gets picked. Now Darriton's getting pressured off and is going to have to retreat. And actually Libalent just kind of lose even more time, even committed an ultimate to that. Actually, Pulse Bomb out to close out on Selene, and they're not done. They want to try and go for a route here, it seems.
Really good forward positioning here by Blank Esports to make sure they're getting as many kills as they can on the Libalent Supreme sort of backplay there. 1 minute 45 remaining for Libalent Supreme. They're spending ultimates, they're sort of saving ultimates, but they're not really getting any distance. You're at the stage now where you haven't gotten yourself a check, you don't have any thirds on the progress. In fact, a lot of these fights are not even taking place on the cap.
It's a very early nano boost out from Gunba because they just want to cut off the column, and it pays off very quickly. This is, like you said, just good forward positioning by Blank, and I think the thing I want to compliment on them the most here is how they're fighting in this open space and using the open space rather than letting Libalent just walk all the way through it to set up. Every single fight that Blank have taken, with the exception of one, has been them cutting off the column of Libalent, and it's exactly how Flash Wolves have been tending to play this season.
And Libalent need to find an opening here. They've changed their composition. They're at the stage where this new composition after recent ultimates do get the ultimate charge back up, and they're losing members very quickly.
Again.
Just as I'm saying, Selene going down. So for Libalent Supreme, they're not finding any openings, and Blank is consistently poking through holes.
They've pushed for the point now, but again, I was talking about this column being cut off. They're lacking Selene, who's only just respawned. Soundberry gives them time to play with, but they need to actually do something with that time. They actually seem to have right now, because they are staying alive, leveraging Darriton's ultimate, but a couple of picks crucially coming through now for Blank, who are still very much in this, who will creating some good space with the self-destructors. Eat You Up starts to open up, and with Libalent having to scatter to mitigate that self-destruct, suddenly they get picked off one by one. It's like a horror movie.
And man, now we're really staring into the face of a full hold here on A, and that's not where you want to be as Libalent Supreme. Even if you do cap, now you're capping into the overtime, you're not going to have that much time to work with onto B. For Blank Esports, this has been an incredibly solid hold, and you do still have a sound barrier coming up. You don't have that many tools on the side of Libalent Supreme. This new lineup they're doing, they've already used all the ultimates. Now you're going to go in for a naked push with absolutely nothing.
Yeah, naked push indeed. They do have the pulse bomb out of Pepper, but he's already getting pressured out. Needs to thread the needle, find a good stick. Sound barrier keeps Blank safe through the earlier parts of this. Good transcendence out of Selene as Hotati finds RQT. Darrington getting picked, though, is bad news for them. They get Shrill in among this. Darrington actually didn't come up on the kill feed. That's spicy. But already this is Libalent looking worse for wear. Huss is still in this one along with Huwu. There are still members here for Libalent, but they're not the right members to close a fight out. And both teams have a similar length of the respawn as Jasper gets DMX, and now Huss, still uncontested, is going off to clean up the remaining members of Libalent. It is just Jasper.
Don't play with your food.
Jasper, yeah, don't play with your food. Jasper actually gets the kill, but he's not on the point as he recalls the mech. He did actually have to retreat as Eat You Up was still there. And that is going to be a complete hold on point A for Blank.
Well played as well. I'm not too sure exactly how much progress there was there, so...
They didn't get the third. They did not get a third.
Yeah, so that's disappointing for Libalent Supreme then, so they don't have a lot to work with. They have to have a perfect defense. And based on their attack, I mean, you hope they defend much better than the way that it just attacked there.
Yeah.
And part of the issue for the Libalent Supreme attack is kind of being unsure about what the game plan is, because they had that original composition that they didn't feel quite confident on. They had, I guess, one play where they did open up the camp just a little bit. Jasper got 90 charge out of 100. Couldn't really find any targets to kill there. Changed up their composition onto the Diva and back onto the Winston as well. Again, just really couldn't find an opening. Huss and the rest of Blank Esports always getting that initial pick. It was on Hotati, then it was on Selene, and every single time you're just going on a low numbers, and despite having a closer reinforcement distance, just didn't really matter for Libalent Supreme. Just couldn't really break it.
And, you know, the game plan for Blank was basically don't let them fight where they want to fight. And that's, you know, when I talk about cutting off the column, for those who aren't quite sure what I mean by that, as a team is setting up, they are moving as a group, but they're not like literally a circular group. There is a line of people moving into a certain position. Blank are engaging on that line as it's moving. They're generally hitting the middle of it and trying to separate members out. And in that, often you'll get a pick as you engage. If you don't, you have very quick access to the healers because you're not charging past the front line. So if you do that, you stop the other team from setting up in the position where they wanted to engage you from. You fight on your terms instead of waiting for them to fight on their terms.
I like this out of Blank Esports now. They almost went for the Pharaoh, and they actually wouldn't have been too bad of an option for them to attack with. We are seeing now a lot more success with that on Camp A, but look, we saw a little bit of IU up with the Widow before on Horizon Lunar Colony. He's had some good successes. If nothing else, he's going to force someone to come and find him. And Jasper, or rather not Jasper, but Pepper, has to be the one to put pressure back onto EU up.
Yeah, what we saw out of him last time he did this is actually he just kept drawing members of the defenders out from where they needed to be defending at. And that's, he's not even doing that this time. No one's really going to address him, and that means they're just kind of pincered in between the main column of Blank and the snipers hitting them from afar. Already Hotati and Darrington, Jasper demexed. This is already looking terrible for Libalent. A headshot on Jasper for good measure, and Blank are just going to gun it for the point here. That's a cheeky sleep there onto Trill, but it's not going to do much for Selene. They're already on the point, only need the third. It's only Pepper, and he is dead. Very, very quick victory for Blank, and that is that kind of blowout we were saying they needed on Assault.
Especially on Assault, because, you know, look, you have this reputation for Blank that they need to be able to curb off. You don't want Blank to be that team who just get a free win on Assault. So the fact that they got their best win, their most convincing win on the map Assault, or rather on the game mode Assault, I think that's really important for a team like Blank. And we talk about the fact that Flash Wolves, after map 2, when you come into map 3, they start to look extremely strong against Libalent Supreme. If Blank didn't have that, we would have some questions, there would be some concerns, but those concerns, for the time being, have been alleviated.
It really seems as well that Blank have just fixed up some things that were going wrong yesterday. They've taken a good hard look at the mistakes they were making, so the fact that this team is able to have that kind of quick turnaround, you know, that's only within the space of a day, is actually a really good sign. And the reason that's a good sign, we knew that the previous Blank roster could do that well enough, and even then there were situations where they took a bit longer. This newer Blank roster with these younger players who don't have that exact same kind of long tournament experience, they have played in tournaments before, don't get me wrong, but it's very different when you're constantly playing back to back to back, and then you only get a week's turnaround anyway until the next part of the, you know, the next set of matches rather. So this is a good sign for this new Blank roster, just in general. It's something that's going to serve them well over the course of this tournament. On the other hand, Libalent didn't necessarily play better or worse than yesterday, I feel. There were probably a couple of things they need to fix up in general between both of these days. Well, I mean, that kind of goes without saying. They lost on both of them, but in among that, having not necessarily played any worse than against Flash Wolves, they lost the one map that they won against Flash Wolves against Blank here. And I think that's really, really interesting, and it makes you wonder how the Blank Flash Wolves match is going to go.
I actually think it says more about Flash Wolves than it says about anyone else because, like you mentioned, Libalent Supreme didn't play too differently to yesterday. They sort of had the same sort of game plans, same compositions. They executed roughly the same as well. Look, Kings Row still could have gone the other way, and had the coin flipped onto Libalent Supreme side, we would have had a different conversation. We said, oh, look,
Yeah, actually, that's
teams
fair.
are just not winning this map against Libalent Supreme, something. And the matter of the fact is, I think, again, says more about Flash Wolves because I think Flash Wolves do not have the amount of polish so far on at least the Soldier and Doomfist gameplay together. They have a lot more polish on the McCree Doomfist gameplay, and you see as soon as they switch onto that, that's when they start to find a lot more success.
Yeah.
And if you want to find even more success, you go back to the Tracer Soldier itself, and that's when Flash Wolves really shut the door on Libalent Supreme. But you look at a team like Blank Esports, so far, EU up onto the Soldier. I kind of question whether that's going to be a detriment because we all know that EU up's Tracer is
Great
quite
Tracer.
strong, but actually on the Soldier, he was able to pull his weight on the through anyway.
And what that should actually say, if you were wanting to use what's happened here to compare Blank to Flash Wolves, is you should be able to walk away from that and go, well, look, Blank actually demonstrated a greater flexibility because we also saw them running the Zarya Reinhardt and all that sort of stuff. You know, DPS aside, we saw them just running a wider variety of picks in a wider variety of situations. And the interesting thing is, and I mentioned this during Kings Row as well, the composition itself doesn't seem to be what causes Blank to win or lose outright. It's like there's nothing really that they play where they just aren't up to scratch. But there are still things they're doing that aren't up to scratch. Like I said, the Kings Row defense was lost in a single push from Libalent, both times for Blank with two completely different team comps. It had nothing to do with the team comp. It's something else Blank are doing. So you can argue whether that is an easier or a harder problem to fix than flexibility issues, but at the end of the day, that's something they need to fix, and Flash Wolves have their own things they need to fix. So really what we've got is two teams that are doing some things well and other things wrong, and there is really just no crossover in those areas. Their own matchup is still going to be one that has a lot of question marks over
Let's
it.
take a look at the replay now. This is going to be the initial attack on through from Libalent Supreme, the unsuccessful attack. And it's not the final one. I think this is the one right before then. And you do find a couple of kills here on the Libalent Supreme side, but not quite nearly enough. So we do head into the overtime, if I'm not mistaken here. And it could have probably have gone slightly more in favor of Libalent Supreme, but the members of Blank just able to hold on with much better trades.
Yeah, and then this is the most kills that Libalent got in a fight until the very, very final one. And in that one, they came off almost completely even to Blank. But we've seen this actually in the past with Blank. Often you'll seem to come off even in the numerical sense, but actually positionally, Blank are still playing a tidier game than you. They tend to not separate out as much when they're closing in on those kills as their opponents do. And Libalent were more spread out, and that's how Blank were able to win the final fight after that one.
Let's take a look at the next replay now. This is going to be on is this the fight beforehand? Because we lost a little bit of time. So 50 seconds left on the clock now for Libalent Supreme. And
This is the same fight.
I think, you're right. This is exactly the same fight. Never mind. Well,
Yeah.
Already gone over that.
And actually, there is something that was highlighted there because it started a little bit earlier. That was a 5 versus 6 that Libalent walked into because Selene was dead, and that was one crucial thing. RQT did go down, but had been in the fight for just long enough while Selene wasn't there that he was keeping Blank topped off while Libalent were just getting chipped away at. When he was finally down, it was because Hotate had gone in quite deep to pick him off and finish him. And that's what I say, when Blank are going even, often they are getting kills while holding position and forcing the enemy team to kind of break position and overextend a bit to close out on kills.
Let's go to the player of the game now. MVP for Blank Esports is Huss on the Doomfist. And I would have maybe even equally have looked at Huwu on the Zarya instead, but Huss on the Doomfist definitely pulled this weight. Look, he still got taken down a fair number of times, and actually it does feel somewhat feast or famine for Blank a little bit, and the reason it almost doesn't is because EU Up does still anchor the team quite a bit, but where Libalent Supreme have been managing to poke holes in the Blank side is if they get an early pick onto Huss. That's how they've been getting a lot of mileage. We talk about the fact that, look, Kings Row A, they lost, and they lose that off the back of losing a couple of crucial members very early that Blank do not get good trades on to sort of keep themselves back in the game and maintain their defense. So Huss, when he wasn't getting killed, he was actually getting a lot of kills on the other side.
Yeah.
And we saw that very early on the first time Huss came out with the Doomfist, and the most recent time now, still having the impact.
And I wonder if what's really going on here is certain teams are reacting to Huss and dealing with him in different ways, and this is just Libalent's particular, sometimes they shut him down and sometimes they don't. And I think a key thing is actually, when we were seeing Huss get really hard shut down against Hong Kong Attitude, what we were also seeing is I Eat You Up also getting shut down a significant amount, and I don't think that was happening as much here, which is why the loss of Huss often wasn't as devastating. And we were also seeing him, like you said, going off a little bit more like what we saw against the likes of Mega Thunder and Machi. So I think really Huss's performance is dependent on how the enemy team is dealing with him right now.
Let's get to the post-match interview now, and it's going to be with IU Up.
我们的潮男和我一起进行这个赛后访问。那我们这边请到的是选手 IU Up 以及我们的教练 Jason 来接受我们的访问。先跟大家 say hello to everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm IU Up from Blank Esports.
好，其实呢 IU Up 一直以来大家都知道，在我们心中很熟悉的就是他的闪光是非常的出色。那本季开始出现了76这样，他自己的感觉是怎么样？
You're mainly known in previous seasons for playing Tracer. How do you feel like transitioning to Soldier? How does it feel?
I've always used to be a soldier main, so it doesn't really feel that different. Like it's not strange or anything to me. It's just like positioning. I need to change up a bit. That's all.
他来台湾以前，他主要玩的就是76，所以他就是角色的也不会说不熟悉，就是已经很熟悉了。他现在唯一需要改的就是他观念上问题，还有那个站位的问题。
是说到观念的问题，因为 Blank 这一次也是换了一些队员的调配嘛，那他自己搭配上有没有什么不习惯的地方呢？
Since we have 2 new players on the team, is there any problems in our synergy?
Obviously, with like new players, it's always like that. It's not like their fault or anything. It just takes time, and we haven't had much time, so obviously we can be better. Yeah.
任何队伍多了新的成员的话，都是需要有时间磨合。我们磨合的时间还不够长，所以大家可以期待我们的进步。
这一点我自己也想问一下教练，因为教练是带队的，一定是感受最深嘛？你自己觉得有影响吗？
最主要的就是一些选手上的一些观念、一些想法、一些比较
So I feel like
好，
some of the
就是大
members
家的
still
基本功夫都已经在了，只是
are coming in
现
with
在要就是
some
了解
new
他们
ideas and some fresh
的
ideas. We're just trying to make sure everyone's trying to get on the
所以
same
来
page here
进行
a
一
little
些
bit.
训练。
要结合成一个团队的感觉，不是个人的表现。好了，那接下来朝南有什么问题可以问？
你好，我想问一下，就是在国王大道进攻 A 点的时候，多数队伍其实都会选择拿的是牛仔配拳王，但你们的选择是76配拳王，我想问一下原因是什么？
When we play Kings Row, most of the teams would pick McCree with Doomfist, but we picked Soldier with Doomfist. And why is that?
I guess it's not really a specific reason. I just feel more comfortable on soldier maybe. We haven't really actually discussed in depth about what we really want to pick, but yeah, soldier's like the go-to. And McCree is good as well. I guess we could do both. Just felt like soldier at the time, maybe.
他是个人觉得他比较习惯玩76，因为我们毕竟新的队伍磨合的时间还不够长，尤其是因为新的队友，所以这个线版的 meta 练习还不够长。只是他个人觉得说他玩76比较顺手，所以是先选76。
的确，因为其实重点是选手能不能好发挥，而不是就是迷信Meta这样。好，谢谢。
谢谢。
这样就可以了吧？那这边呢，我们也非常谢谢朝南以及我们的 IU Up 和我们的 Jason， 那也恭喜他们获得这一场比赛胜利。那我们休息一下，等一下第二场对战组合
There you
马上
have
就
it.
过来
It
喽
is。Serenity and Eat You Up from Blank Esports in the post-match interview. And the other thing I might want to add to that is the one question I found quite interesting that was asked was, why are you running the Soldier Doomfist instead of the McCree Doomfist? And I actually think, at least from my observation, it's because we haven't seen the high impact McCree play out of Eat You Up like we have seen on Mui, like we have seen on Zonda.
Well,
the one time we've seen the McCree from Eat You Up, it just wasn't on that.
Yeah, and he did say himself he feels more comfortable generally on Soldier than on McCree, so I think that is a significant factor. But the other thing that's actually at play here, they could just sort of picked it up and had that extra impact, but they have had the best Soldier Doomfist we've seen so far, and even teams like Flash Wolves who have Zonda, an incredible Soldier player in his own right, were not having anywhere near the success that Blank were having just then with that Soldier Doomfist. Those happened against quite different teams, so that is also a factor, but in general, it seems that the lack of the McCree isn't too much to their detriment, but I do agree it's probably something they'll need to pick up to have that extra impact.
All right, well, let's see how Blank go in their future games, but they are done now for tonight. Next up, we're going to have Mega Thunder taking on AHQ Esports Club. We're going to take a quick break before we get there, so we'll see you soon.